password reset tech. So, I'm familiar with this, right? Like you can argue with the computer all day long, but it knows what your password is, whether you do or not. So,
That's the first time I've ever got a notification that we're going live.
Congratulations. It's the only thing that's going to work today. So,
right. Well, I just passed a bar called the Bold O'Donohue's, and I don't know how I feel about that name. That's apropos of nothing. I just felt it deserved mention.
Are you going to check it out?
Appreciate that.
You going to go podcast in a bar?
I could, but no.
Oh, that's boring.
Because this is not a topic worth having. I mean, if I had some mead, maybe. But I don't. Mead is very hit or miss.
Fair. All right, we have a topic. We were supposed to do research, and I guarantee we didn't do research.
How dare you guarantee that? Speak for yourself.
Is this like new research, or does like if it's in our wheelhouse and we've had all this other background research, we could just reiterate how fucking confusing this shit is. So
we can definitely do that. What we have done in the past is we looked at the Arthurian legends and we tried to like pick things out of that. But right now we're gonna focus kind of on Merlin and probably several other people with M names and be confused and try to figure out some more of the details of what might have been the real original Merlin in the Dresden Files based on what we have learned in peace talks, as well as the other tidbits and how the stories might stitch together.
I don't know what you're talking about. I plan to speak with surety and authority on all matters.
Okay,
whether he has it
whether
or
you're
not,
right
so.
or not, E.G., that's usually how you navigate it.
Well, luckily, I'm always right, so it works out that way.
Okay, please elucidate us about Merlin and everything that he would have been in the Dresden Files.
So here's the thing. Merlin is a pain in the ass. Merlin has decided to make everything difficult because he could be anywhere and nowhere all at once because he does time travel. And that already pisses me off because I hate those theories. So as far as I'm concerned, Merlin can kick rocks.
It's what I've said before multiple times, especially with the Lash thing, right? Mind control and time travel are really dangerous tropes to be playing around with in your story, because if they're not handled right, you're just going to blow it up. I mean, so far, so good, right? But that's why, like, I had such a tough time with the Lash story in general. It's like, once we've established that she can literally build a holographic framework over your entire psyche, over your entire experience, and make everybody else look at you like you're loony, where's the line? There isn't a line anymore. You are compromised. She has total control. Even when she sacrifices herself, there's still going to be a corner in my mind that's going to be like, there is an alternate story where he's still trapped in his head with her. Because how do you, where's his top? Where's the Inception level thing that tells him he's out of the simulation? Because it doesn't exist. And time travel is kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, right. The dog. Hey, Bubbles, you forgot the dog. So thank you. That's great. I'm just going to squee for a minute. But anyway, but like time travel is the same thing, right? Merlin can bend time and space in the fifth dimension like nobody else we've seen, possibly including some of the little G deities, maybe excluding Vatarung and Odin, right, as Santa Claus, have done any kind of like actual time manipulation. And by some theories and some, meshing of science and religion, once you get to like the fourth or fifth dimension, you're pretty much a god. So what can Merlin not do at that point, right? Like,
and where is he now? And who? And like it gets super. Is he everywhere? Is he nowhere? What happened to Merlin?
I just want to be clear right now. He's not in the fucking crystal. So if you're still thinking that in your head while you're listening to us, he's not in the fucking crystal.
Where's my imaginary sport ball? Stop that.
Yeah. Okay. So the problem with fifth dimensional beings is the question to the answer to where and when he is yes, because he can be in all places and times at any point in time. So it's really irrelevant, right? When do we? What do we want? Time travel. When do we want it? It's irrelevant because time travel. But
I mean, you're always traveling. You're just always going in one direction at a fairly steady rate, unless there's some weird shenanigans going on.
It's also like what you're doing. It was important enough to build this super complex time travel-y person. Where is he now? He can time travel. Presumably, he's somewhere. Who's he fighting? That's more important than what we know is going on. Since one would assume he's busy somewhere,
or he's just in
or
transit.
He's dead. Or he's dead. I mean, he's not necessarily.
But he can't be dead if he's a time traveler, right? Then you can't.
Time travelers still die. They just
no,
that's
not how that works.
You can always just be.
Did you never watch Doctor Who? Come on, how many times did he die?
No.
But you don't actually. But Doctor Who's never actually dies. Even though, but that's because
he's
he gets
not
reborn,
a time
right?
Lord. We're not getting bogged down in BBC terrible shows.
I also have never watched Doctor Who.
We're talking about standards here, man. So Terminator, Hot Tub Time Machine. Come on, didn't you guys watch Infinity War?
Back to the Future.
The hot
Infinity
take.
War has terrible time travel in it, and shit's all over better time travel.
Oh my gosh!
The hot take in chat is that Merlin is Mac and he's out.
He's not. He's an angel. Read the books, people.
Yeah, but I mean that's Harry's theory anyway, and I mean at least Mac kind of confirms it, but he could also be lying.
Do we need EG for this episode, or should I just rage quit him now?
We probably need him because he's still the encyclopedia, and there's going to be weird, tiny little pieces to pull. Like, so I went to one of the Wikipedia things of Dresden fandom, and they haven't updated from Peace Talks, which I figured they would because they're nerds, right? But no, they still only have up to Cold Days of information on Merlin. But like to put this crazy timeline a little bit in perspective, so he saved the critical texts from the Library of Alexandria, which burned down in year 48. Mm-hmm. And then he's also running around and doing things in Edinburgh hundreds and almost 1,000 years later, something like that. And with the Arthurian whatnot happening, it's like the amount of time he's been alive from like recorded birth to unknown death is immense.
Right. And 48 puts him pretty close to what other things that we know, because he formed at least the proto-White Council in Rome and like proto-Rome, right? So, obviously around, AD 1.
And he also, I think, he gets attributed with helping to establish, is it the Catholic Church or the Roman Catholic Church?
Catholic.
Yeah.
Catholic, Roman Catholic. Someone can explain to me the difference there.
There are differences that people will kill each other over, but for our purposes, it's really just a matter of when,
And I think that it was Bob that said that in Cold Days, and like he helped create the Catholic Church to further preserve knowledge during the European Dark Age, which was not really near the year 48, but all of those stories might be apocryphal. Yet, like also winning the Castle of Edinburgh in card game, right? Isn't that one of the things?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because, the Millennium Falcon's so passive, so yeah.
I mean, the unfortunate thing with Harry being the protagonist and essentially the chosen one is that he's probably going to mirror things. So all the outlandish stuff about Merlin is probably very similar to Dresden in that it happened, it got embellished for purposes and things like that. But it's like, truth is stranger than fiction. He's probably got really lucky and lots of crazy antics and all this kind of stuff.
Right, but one thing we know,
I wouldn't bet against winning it in a card game.
I'm poking at the trope, because Millennium Falcon, Han Solo, all that stuff. But that's fine, and I would tend to agree with you, except for Demon Reach, right? Demon Reach was either done by a deity or somebody with deity level power, because A, there's nothing else like it. B, Bob / Demon Reach himself, Alfred, is pretty sure Merlin did it, and playing back the dumbing it down for you, Dresden type of thing, but like thinking about it, not, what Bob says is he didn't make it at 5 different points in time. Like, it's not like he made it in the 500s and then went to 0 and then went to -500 and made it. When he made it at all points in space and time, like theoretically, like it is a fixture of reality now. And, which makes sense because you got to hold timeless beings and, some other things like that. Right. But Like that's so far above and beyond the power scope we've seen displayed. The only things that would even come close, in my opinion, are like what we assume / Word of Jim have heard angels and archangels can do, and the Eye of Baelor, right? And even the Eye of Baelor is like, yeah, okay, maybe it's on the board next to where this kind of power exists, but it's not in the same, it's not in the inner ring of like how fucking crazy powerful this is, you know?
Yep. I mean, plus you couple the fact with how it's described as the power of like essentially starlight, and it had to be beautiful to keep all this stuff in. This seems like a very cosmic type of power that he was playing with. You know, some sort of, maybe he also got a bit of angel grace for a while. Has been a theory for quite some time.
I think that's the first time I've heard of it, actually. So yeah, that's.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the more specific theory is that it went to that he had the Archangel Raphael's grace, because Raphael's the demon binder who, you know, sealed Azazel in Duadel, however you pronounce that place. You know, the prison of the, you know, the whole Tartarus and that kind of thing with these connections. So.
Okay, the Raphael bit sounds a little familiar. Yeah. Okay. That's, I mean,
because for a while the idea was maybe Mac was the transubstantiated version of him instead of a Grigori.
Right. Which, I mean, yeah, there's so little we understand for some of that stuff. Like, I wouldn't rule it out per se. So.
Yeah, it was neat. But I mean, it's not entirely implausible considering the power we have to be talking about to pull this off. Now,
right,
there's an outside shot that he just was that great, and because, you know, there's the old word of Jim about how theoretically, if you get powerful enough as a wizard, you could just start rewriting reality. So he could have just been that guy, but.
Right.
That doesn't seem as likely as based on the way we see power interact.
Right. Well, and going back to what you said earlier with the, you know, Harry's journey and Merlin's may at least be a reflection of each other, which, you know, is where I kind of grin and bear and forgive a little bit the people that think Harry is Merlin, etc. And again, I'm not entirely ruling it out. I just don't think it's amazingly likely. But, you know, Michael got Uriel's grace, you know, Merlin getting Raphael's grace, you know, to do this thing. You know, it just shows you what a wizard could do with that kind of power too, right? You know, like that's the other thing. Like it's like Harry getting the Winter Night mantle, right? Like we've seen Winter Knights and they've been badasses by comparison, but you've never seen a wizard Winter Night, you know, and just what, you know, wizards bring to the table creatively and even understanding the power better. You know, but even still, Demon Reach seems, I mean, as the words are leaving my mouth, I reconsider them, but it's like Demon Reach seems like such a narrow focus, and I'm like, except that it is holding timeless beings and outsiders. So forgive me for my brief slip up, but it's just like it's on the same order of like it's a tiny island in the middle of nowhere, and also like the greatest prison of creation, you know, outside of hell, I guess, you know, assuming how they handle that. But
well, I guess it makes a certain point of sense that if you're looking to bind and trap beings that get to the level of beyond time and space type deal, you're going to want a fixed point within time and space to do that, I would imagine.
Right. And I mean, and even if we delve into that, like it starts to get a little bit off topic, so I don't want to go too far, but like you have a prison to hold these things inside reality because it must have been next to impossible to just banish them, which is what OG white gods should have done, would have done, did. And so like in the sense, like reality is like a reverse prison, right? It's a garden, you know, because we've got all of creation inside and all the monsters are outside. And for some reason, these guys got through, you know, the wall, right? And so we have this inside prison now to deal with that because that was easier than re-banishing them, you know, than keeping them out. Like,
oh, unless they're, I mean, yeah, because it's
it's its own topic, I think, almost. You know, it's like,
I mean, it's actually like a more common trope than I first realized. I read a book series recently where it's like it's a lot of the same beats that I recognize there, with something outside and something inside, and can't get rid of it. So it was easier to have it like captured inside here than get it outside of reality.
It's
Which I think that and you probably know this more than me, Justin. That probably that's probably a Lovecraftian kind of trope, I guess.
the problem with invoking Lovecraft is like you are ants on a raft. There is no keeping Cthulhu. There is no banishing Cthulhu. There is no anything. There is, please God, don't let him wake up because he will unzip reality. And he's not even the biggest guy in the pond, So like Azathoth, who is more or less the universe, awoken, if he farts, unzips reality. Like, a little bit crass, but also pretty much spot on if you're familiar with the lore. So, with H.P. Lovecraft, like the gods, like the old ones and that sort of thing, their powers are just like completely off the charts. Like I've seen some theories where it's like they are fifth dimensional beings or even higher, and what you associate with Cthulhu is just where he intersected our plane of existence. So you're not even seeing his power or anything like that. He just touched the 3D world, and that's what it looks like. There's a lot of crazy lore, because also over time, as our understanding evolves, because a lot of it was based in 1908, 19 whatever, we didn't understand Egypt as a place and had people, mummies were a thing, so we're taking advantage of like the scientific awakening and people's ignorance at the time. And so like you have people trying to like stretch the imagination there to make it even more incredible by today's standards, because people are like, oh, Cthulhu's not that scary. It's like, yes, because you grew up with him, and you're not thinking about it in the right mind frame. But anyway, so yeah, like depending on how Butcher handles them, like it would take something like the White God. Like there's nothing any of the mortals should be able to do against that. Once the old ones are on the march, it's over. Like that's why Cthulhu being asleep is the important part, because once he wakes up, it's bad. And apparently, we're going to fight him.
It is hinted pretty heavily that Cthulhu is part of the Dresden mythos and is in our reality and sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the what was it, the first church of the what was the Molly's short story, the cathedral. Yeah, so and then referring the sleeper and like all of that, they all but said Cthulhu as far as I'm concerned. Like, so yeah, I think that's the kaiju that Dresden is going to fight. So, which again, like I said, like he shouldn't have been able to fight a Titan. That should have been way outside of what he should have been able to handle. So I have no idea how he's going to get powered up to even like put a dent in a kaiju, let alone Cthulhu. So it's either when he fights, Fairvax or the other dragon, or it's going to be, him fighting Cthulhu. So,
well, I mean, we also see that like even something as big as a walker, which is supposed to be on Uriel's level more or less, but with different restrictions, is they sort of come down to quote unquote human sized. So I mean, we may see like actually big tentacly faced lumbering Cthulhu around, but I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of has like a bite-sized version, and it's just the whole plane again with this is just a fraction of an aspect of a blink of him.
Great. Yeah, he's not awake. He's just got one eye open. You better run. So,
I mean, because that's anyway, the outsiders is you pretty much don't kill them. You just kind of send them back outside, and the whole point is going to be to end up trying to have to close them out rather than straight up, ganking Cthulhu.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with Ethnu, basically, right? He didn't kill her. She's imprisoned, but
right. He beat her up. He took her stuff, and he locked her away.
Right.
With a lot.
Apparently, he can call on the power of anything in that prison. Though,
well, as long as he has the will to resist it, which is his whole, But yes.
With stubborn as a mule, that's just dressed in super.
But that's that's what the gatekeeper warned him about years ago. Is you're not ready to touch the power here, and that could have even just been referring to the general ley line body heat they give off. But yes, you can, and then in cold days you are the warden. You can let them out.
Right. Well, and so thinking about that and trying to get it a little bit closer to the Merlin conversation we were supposed to be having was what
You
maybe
just change the title.
Yeah, maybe that's where Dresden intersects a little closer to Merlin's story. Is maybe Dresden does pick up one of the angels' grace or something like that, and that superpowers his will so that he can use his outsider army to fight the outsiders or something. But I don't know.
I mean,
Like,
a point also in chat that's a theory that I agree with, that I think we talked about before, that I'm not sure you agree with, that that whole the notebooks that goes back to Merlin implies that Merlin is Harry's ancestor, and I agree with that theory. I think that it had like Ebenezer trained Harry and his mother and back and back and back, and it's been in the family line. That's the implication I get. That his master to his mom was his dad, and or something that was family related, so that Harry is actually, blood relation to Merlin.
Yeah, I don't think it's blood relation, but there's certainly like a, if you're familiar with, the Sith line through Yoda and that sort of thing, like I'd buy that, that Harry technically was, Ebenezer's apprentice for a little while. Ebenezer apprenticed under Merlin, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think they're a blood relation necessarily. So
I think that. I mean, there's no real evidence other than those notebooks, which could be supporting your take on it just as well, that it's more of a master to apprentice line all the way back, but not necessarily bloodline.
Yeah, so, I mean, I might even stretch it as far to kind of like try and get a middle ground where, like, back in the day, becoming an apprentice was like being adopted into the family, but again, I wouldn't say bloodline. Yeah.
I'm just thinking. So, I mean, and that's just my little theory, like thinking about it, is that they both have immense magical batteries, for lack of a better word, right? They have a really big power pool to draw from, both Ebenezer and Harry, which I think is related to their bloodline to Merlin. But that's again, I have no real evidence. It's just all speculation. I think it kind of fits.
Right. Yeah,
I wouldn't be overly surprised if it turns out to be that way, because at a minimum, we have the baseline that it's a master to apprentice thing. So even if it doesn't turn out to be family, we already have that as a known. That's what it is. Now, I guess there could be some general idea to that, because most of this stuff passes through the maternal line as far as magic goes, but obviously in Maggie and Harry's case, they got it from Ebenezer, because Harry's grandmother was just a person. So if there's a blood relation going back, maybe that could account for that kind of thing.
And I mean, yeah, it usually passes through the female line. That's what we've been told. Maybe there will be some kind of lore about how it's special that it's been only males for some reason, because it was Merlin. Or maybe, if we ever get the bloodline, there has been females involved, and this time around down here, it happened to be from Ebenezer, and it worked out. Like, the bloodline continued.
Well,
it is factual, like you say.
Because if Merlin, to tie this back further, because we know Mab has a connection to him, at least as far back as around the time of Hastings, when she's supposedly ascended to queenhood. If she is Morgana or Morgause or Nimue, one of these major magical or more magical, at least in the case of the Morgana and Nimue aspect, then you've got father and mother as very potent. See, that's why I waffle a bit with the idea of Harry being related, because if it turns out then he's essentially related to, and this is obviously supposing this turns out to be the case, but he's essentially an ancestor of Merlin and Mab. It's like, all right.
I mean, that might be why she was so interested
chosen one,
in
but
him.
Right. I mean, yeah, but that's it's like,
doesn't that make him Bob's brother then?
Doesn't that make him what?
Bob's brother?
Yeah, I guess. Assuming that he turns out to be hers, yes.
Mab and her sister were both mortal, and we kind of get the idea, especially with how she reacts, that she knew Merlin when she was still human, also, not just the lady.
In Peace Talks, what Corpse says to her, I remember you as a bawling brat. I remember your pimply face when you rode with the Conqueror. I remember how you wept when Merlin cast you out.
So she was definitely human.
Well, she was with him in whatever capacity she was. Like, is she human if she's a changeling?
No, but pimply face. I'm like the lady doesn't get pimples,
No,
right?
that's just an insult, like calling you an
Yeah, I was
insect.
gonna say, I don't think that's necessarily like hard and fast.
Right.
I mean, yeah, maybe she was afflicted with pox or something, but like, I think that's a little more of a, you were basically a brat, like he says, and
Yeah. It is interesting. He connects her directly to William the Conqueror and Merlin, which gives
of course
us
she's connected to the Conqueror. That makes perfect sense because it was
Hastings.
Yes, and that is the moment where Norse gave up their mantle and gave it to the Fae to be the gatekeepers. All of that seemed to be at the Battle of Hastings, which was probably on multiple levels of reality. And so it makes perfect sense for her to have been a part of taking it away from the Norse. Corb continues to say, like, if he was yet among the living, do you think he would still love you? Would he be so proud of what you've become?
So Corb thinks he's dead, which is an important thing, because as much as we hate Corb and he's a slime, he's also not a slouch, right? Like, he's got some power, he's probably got some knowledge.
It's so hard to take it seriously that he is actually quite powerful and has power. Right. And the way he's represented and how he's like this toady to what's her name?
He's a toad.
Ethnu.
Yeah, Ethnu.
Yeah.
Haha, no. But yeah.
I'm not intended, but should have been.
It would have. I actually think it would have felt. She would have felt even more picked up if he maybe had been developed more before we saw. Like, we didn't really see him until the same time.
He kind of comes in like the Red King. Like, people talk him up, and he's got flashes of stuff. But I mean, he has the benefit of still being alive, so we can see more of him. Whereas the Red King just kind of came and got ganked immediately. But he does suffer a bit from that.
A bit more on page or on screen. Would also have made the impact of her better. I feel like, kind of like if we had seen him being more of a badass, because he's very old and he's very powerful, right? But we don't.
Well, he's even got a prophecy about him, about how he's not going to die until somebody shoots a fireball into the ocean.
Right.
If someone's going to shoot fireballs, we got our boy Dresden.
Oh, right. The thing with the Red King, though, was like Morgan got within arm's reach of him, right? So he was always kind of a punk, or at least he was always kind of close. But against that, you have basically he just masqueraded as a god for the last 1,000 years or whatever, So like the fact that he had any power was probably because, he took on that mantle, for lack of a better word, of Kukulkan. But
that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah. But with Corb, like we don't know enough of Corb's backstory necessarily. Maybe there's more fairy tale stuff we can get in there, but I don't know that I'm worried about him again until like the end. Like I think he got beat enough. It's kind of like anticlimactic in the sense that like Ethmu was apparently like their entire army, right? Because it's like, sure, they showed up, they had Jotuns, they had dudes and that sort of thing. But if Ethnu had not been there, that would not have been a fight. Like that would not have been nearly as brutal as it was, because it was A, a sneak attack, and B, Ethnu taking out anything of any kind of resistance. She took out the godlings, she took down Titania and everybody else. Like Corb's badass, maybe he would have laid 1 or 3 of them out, but not all of them. Let alone would he have tried it, because he's a worm, like.
I mean, he's strong, but Mab doesn't seem to be afraid of him in particular. I mean, when Harry's talking to her about it, it's like he's more than your equal in power, but she's not. She doesn't seem to think that like if she went against him, it would be a particular issue.
It's also Mab, but so Matt, I think Mab's entire motto is "fuck around and find out." So,
but don't lose.
Well, I mean, but she says she's telling you to try her. Like, she's like, I'm not going to throw the first punch, but I will throw the last one. So,
okay. I've been, as you guys have been talking, I've been reading some of the various Wikipedia things, and I can't, not entirely on topic, but there's a lot of overlap from the Britannic mythology to Norse, and I think obviously a certain amount of like ideas being transferred to them, but I think in some way you could look at it as indicative to how the mantles were transferred, or some other crossover there. Like, so Avalon might have been translated from the Isle of Apples, and they had 9 priestesses or something that was ruling it, and Morgana might have been one of them. But 9 is an important number in Norse mythology, and there were apples in Norse mythology that kept everyone eternally young, and like that was also apparently part of the name of Tirnanok, of it's the land of the ever youthful. Well, also this sounds like fairies, because how many of them are old looking? There's literally only 2 that we can think of that look old, and they're meant to look old because they're meant to be the mothers. But the connections between them, I think, as well as like if you look at the Lady of the Lake, and previously we had thought that might have been Leah, but what if that was Mab before she was queen, and she was helping Arthur, or Merlin, doing all the Arthur stuff? And like the Lady of the Lake is the one who gave Excalibur to Arthur, which is weird when Leah couldn't touch Amarachius until it had been sullied by Dresden. But if before she was fully queen, or maybe a changeling or something like that, and she was mortal, whatever that might be, even if eternally young, then she might have been able to help that way. And during the Arthurian legends, building up all of the whole Britannic identity and their power base, to then later with the Conqueror take over with the Gatekeepers entirely.
But who's
that
is the Conqueror Arthur, or who's the
No,
No,
the Conqueror,
William.
the Conqueror. So
Yeah.
Arthurian legends take place in the 5th or 6th century, more or less, depending, because it was written down in the 12th century, so who gives a fuck. But William the Conqueror in 1066, but like this would have meant that Merlin was being taught by Vaterung, and to a certain extent, I would say possibly sired by Vaterung, based on some certain hints of he had a mortal mother and an incubus for a father. What's an incubus in this context? Probably not a white court vampire, but if something else, as well as his name apparently might have a hint in the French of like how his name got derived from a Welsh thing, maybe connected to a blackbird, like a raven that Vaterung is always with, or signified and everything. So
it is interesting if we then go with the whole like if it is a bloodline, if it goes back,
Yes,
back
then
to
it
Merlin,
goes back to
Vaterung, who is interested in Harry, which
and
would and Meg, because maybe they're family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not that far fetched.
And then
no,
if Merlin and Mab being Mab the Lady of the Lake, and it then basically be Merlin had helped Mab and other Fae become powerful enough to take down the Norse mythology handover.
Sure. I mean, listen, there's the two ways that always seem the strongest to me were either her or Morgana / Morgan Le Fay, because they're the same person for all intents and purposes.
Right.
I tend to think if I'm going to not even flip a coin and you have to pick a gun to my head, I'm picking Morgana for 2 reasons. One, she's slightly more sorceressy, magically inclined, so Mab being mortal once, that
Mm-hmm.
2, we already know that her athame is at least important in the Dresden Files, because 1, it's used as a vector for Nemesis, and 2, it's on the same general level as Amarachius and the other swords in terms of power, to the point where Leah has to give up her debt over Harry in order to even just keep it. And then the last time we see it after Leah's been she-sickled is Mab has it.
Mm-hmm.
Which in my opinion, that's like coming home. Like I think Mab knows exactly what that was, and
How did she?
I think it was hers.
Well, Leah knows too, because she's like, it's not. Don't cheapen it by comparing it to yada yada. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters whose it is.
Interesting.
Is at least how she refers to it, based on my general memory of Summer Night. But yeah, so I mean Morgana, and plus she's got the stronger connection to Merlin as opposed to Nimue and Morgause, who are slightly stronger connected to Arthur. And Morgana being Morgause's sister most of the time would lend itself to Titania and Mab, if that's how it shook out. one being more with Arthur and one being more with Merlin.
Right. And when you were talking about that in the pre-show, like it resonated so well. And I'm not 100% sure I've given too much thought before on like who Titania would have been. And just like you focus on Mab and then you're like, well, there's nobody directly adjacent that you feel like you could squeeze it in. However, if you introduce Mab and Titania as more or less a single unit, and then take all the chaos that is actually present in the fucking legend in the first place, and the fact that multiple characters, like their names are used interchangeably and all of this stuff, maybe that makes sense because there was a twin involved and people couldn't keep straight who was doing what and when.
And they look
Because-
identical.
yeah, right, because they're literally twins. And
Yeah.
but I also really dig the part that you added where Titania would go after Arthur and Mab would go after Merlin, because to me that fits their themes so well. Mab is absolutely going after the salt and pepper established guy because it's practical. She's going to get her sugar daddy and learn and all of these things. And Titania is absolutely going after the young hero because that's what love and the summer court and those things would. So like when you said those things, I was like, holy shit, like that seems like it fits so well to me, you know?
There's
And even though
bits, not entirely on this. If Mab is Lady of the Lake, one of the first things that was described of the Lady of the Lake in her miracles was that she can walk on water or survive underneath water, obviously because she's off the fucking lake, which the Queen of Air and Darkness apparently can because that is her realm, as she says. Also, Morgana might have been derived in some way from the Morrigan, which was a kind of like she's hard to describe and I don't fully remember enough of her, but she was always related to ravens as well with like Odin and whatnot. But Merlin also had the ability of shape-shifting, as did the Lady of the Lake, I think, as it did Morgana. So Mab can change her look whatever she wants, but Merlin being able to shapeshift, maybe that was magic, or maybe he had some fucking masks because he knew how to do masks the way that Batarang does.
I was taught
or
by him,
because
so it's
he
not.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta say, like maybe on the 1% of the bell curve, like I can't rule out the fact that after Beowulf is Odin, that Merlin might have been Odin as well. It just that also clicks in a bunch of things where it's like you got to have godlike power. What an easier way to get it than to be a god, you know? Like I'm not necessarily saying it's super plausible, but I think it should go in the pool as much as anything else, especially after peace talks, you know.
I understand that, but it seems more like to me that he was actually two different people, only because the way Mab reacts to Corb's taunting about him, if Merlin is essentially still
Fair.
Odin and around and even a part of her court under a different name, there's no reason to really be that hurt about it.
That's absolutely fair. Yeah. So the Morrigan is often described as a trio of individuals, all sisters, called the Three Morigna. That seems important.
Yeah, I think this came up when we were talking about the mothers and the fates and stuff the last time.
Right.
She's more Celtic, right? The
Yes,
Morrigan?
yeah, she's just Irish most of the time.
Irish mythology, yeah.
When we came up or talking about like triple goddesses and whatnot, it's like, yeah, there's this thing, and then also ravens.
It has been
'cause she
translated
kinda
as Great Queen or Phantom Queen. So doesn't sound like anybody we know. Sorry, guys.
Because I think people really drew that distinction when we first see Mab in her, judgment aspect, where she's all black with the black eyes, and
I mean, he
and she's
basically
got that
describes
look.
her as a bird at the end of Skin Game,
Right?
with the black eyes.
Mainly associated with war and fate, especially with foretelling doom, death, or victory in battle.
Yeah, right. Because the Morrigan is kind of connected to the Disir and the Valkyries, if you look at it in certain ways.
Right.
Well, plus, so it's a triple goddess like Hecate and all that, or because then it could follow that it's the same general principle. The queens are the split versions of all these triple goddesses, so Mab having an aspect of it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't necessarily. Well, yeah, it is. It is believed that these were all names for the same goddess. There you go. So basically, it's talking about their three names, which they're Irish. So fuck you. I'm not going to even try to pronounce them.
Andreas, this is where you shine.
Yeah,
Really?
you're Swedish. You can pronounce Irish words, right?
You're the closest one. You're the foreigner to it.
Yeah. So they're the three are also named sisters of the three land goddesses, which again, fuck you, I'm not pronouncing those names. Yeah, so a shape-shifting goddess, blah blah blah. But it also gives us three more plausible names for, pick one that belongs to, Mother Winter, right? So since we've been doing the triple goddess thing, but so
Mother Winter ain't got time to be bothered with people's shit anymore.
she's only like 3 millennia away from retirement, so
Nah, she's the kind of person that pretty much she's like the old person that just keeps living because they keep having something to do, even if hers is just spitting acid on the floor and making fun of Granny Summer.
Well, she can't go anywhere. She's still got to let Wormwood loose. So I'm tired of these motherfucking mortals on this motherfucking plane.
Well, actually, that was more the Summer's like her job, because like it is life, it is growth, even if it is also destruction. But it's kind of both of them, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's two sides of the same coin.
I think it's Mother Summer who is like, oh, it's not time for that one. But she's looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, well, because
she might have
Winter's
created
very
it,
happy about that idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she might have created it, but maybe Mother Winter's the one that gets to break it, and let it loose. So,
I mean, maybe. But, even Bob back in Summer Night when we were first talking about their dichotomy is, or in an era of Ice Age or rampant growth, it's like, well, the second one doesn't sound so bad. It's like, yeah, great if you're the Ebola virus.
Right.
Now, the two sides of the same fucked up everybody.
Apropos.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, yeah, I mean, that's why I like the idea that they share these kind of triple masks, because they are essentially their balances and two sides of the same aspect. But that seems to be a theme as well that crops up all the time. Love and hate are two sides of the same coin. Soulfire and Hellfire. These are all, they're just
a lot of
the same thing pointed in different directions.
Right.
There's also this interesting thought I had. This was originally in regards to Merlin, but also with these triple goddesses. We know it's an established fact, human faith and belief has power, so much so that the fake shroud, gets a significant amount of power just from that. And then we, do these triple goddesses, do they draw from all these different religions, get more power from them and from all of them? And does the Merlin, if he's around, not around, does he draw, there's a lot of Merlin in pop culture, a lot of thought about him. Does that grant him more power?
Well, Merlin was human-ish, at least, wizard. So does Dresden get more power from people thinking of him as the Wizard of Chicago? Or is it just, does he get more usable magical power, or is it just the
if he's smart enough to use it? So I still think he's going to get minor benefits. But
if a cloth gets power from a lot of people believing it can do something, why shouldn't a wizard who actually can wield the powers that are around him not gain power from people believing that he is something or has something?
Two things. First of all, Merlin's not getting any power from the pop culture because he's dead. So we'll settle that one. But if he was alive, yes, maybe. The second thing, what was it? Crap, I lost it.
See, I think it depends on because it's about the triple goddesses. If they're all essentially the same person wearing a different mask in these different religions, then yes, I would say they get the collective benefit. Yeah. If they were all individuals, then sort of came together in the mothers and the queens and the ladies to then get it, then I would say, yeah, they sort of get a passive, but it's more about, I think now, a foothold in reality rather than an actual power boost. I'm pretty
Right.
sure, like 99.9% of whatever all 6 queens can do are because of the mantle by design, because faith is fickle, but that power set just kind of endures. It goes, it always moves,
The
even
power
if you
might-
die.
Right.
The power might go to in a cosmic, the rules, how they're set up kind of ways. The human faith believes in all these different triple goddesses. All these triple goddesses are all connected to the mantle, and then the mantle kind of like it gets baked in there.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to me, the thing is, they're not getting a power boost per se because they're all different aspects of the same thing. It's a way to survive, like Odin survived through Vatarung, through Beowulf, through everybody else, right? Because otherwise, they would have been consigned to oblivion at some point. So
Yeah, it's more about-
that's they passed with the torch, right? And so to go back to some fan theories from our own guys, that Hecate was the G for her time, and then she split herself into these aspects and went from there. I think it goes back older than that, in my opinion, especially with so many of these things. It's kind of like the Venus, right? Like there's always a like fertility goddess, regardless of what we call her.
Yeah.
She's always
is
been
it
there.
Is it always the same fertility god? This is an interesting question, right?
In the Dresden Files, maybe.
It might be. I
yeah.
think it's a little split and a little. I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the triple goddesses are going to turn out to be like, at least as far as things like the Fates and the Norns and stuff like that, are going to be essentially the same being, kind of flowing in and out of different whatevers to keep themselves relevant and powerful.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a difference between your your Aphrodite versus your African fertility goddess. I don't think those are going to be the same people.
That's probably true. There's also this thing we've met Hades. He's the Greek Hades. He's not, and there's no real correlation to Hades over to Norse mythology, for example, where it's more hell, and I know they have another, like a more benign death god too, but I can't remember right now.
I think it may even turn out to be as simple as the smart ones got with the times and adapted. Modern problems require modern solutions, and the other ones just kept their own power and fucked off to the never neverns, like whatever.
Or live on Earth and wrestles.
Right.
But I don't think. Like those kind of gods, I don't think we're going to see someone of like Zeus's level. I think we're going to see someone, or even someone like your Athenas or your Ares. These gods are sticking around and getting power, but I don't think they're going to be the top tier people specifically because they're still around and kicking and doing this.
And more demigods and hero types.
Yeah, your Herculeses and your yes, in that general. I mean, you could make an argument for someone like maybe an Artemis type. I wouldn't necessarily think wasn't sticking around, but then she could also be part of the summer court, and that's a different issue.
He was wisdom, though, right? So yeah,
that was
makes
Athena.
sense.
Artemis
was sorry.
One of the hunting and
Artemis was the hunter.
There's also this whole greater mythos of Dresden that while we have had Jim give us some tidbits and talk about some power levels of, for example, the mothers who are Archangel level, if I remember correctly.
Well, they're just about, yes. They're probably just one of them in every reality, whereas Uriel's definitively just the same in every reality.
And there's this interesting, it's interesting how, Big G, he's one. If Uriel's one, then Big G's for sure just one. Then what about all these other gods? They're probably not one. There's one for each reality. These minor gods. Did Big G make the minor Gs? Like we don't really know.
That's what I tell people, dude. Like once you get past, I mean, shit, just about the Battle of Hastings, but maybe you can go as far back as like Egypt. It gets weird because if the white god exists and if Christianity is quote unquote the reality or whatever in the Dresden Files, then that means the white god created the heavens and the earth by separating the chaos from order, which is when he cast out the outsiders, theoretically, right? And somehow between then and everything else, when he created everything, then you've got all these hundreds of of thousands of
Right.
other beings that
And
came
they're
into power.
all
And they
true.
also created, they also created the earth. They also did all of these things. And so like that's where like even in like I've had some go at this even in like D&D, for example, right? Because like every race has their own pantheon. And so you've got, Moradin created the dwarves, and you've got Corlon created the elves, and they created the earths, and then you get a little bit of cross-pollination where it's like they work together in some things and they've interacted. But like that's where Dresden gets weird by bringing all of those mythologies together, because it's like, what was Ganesha doing while, White God was throwing the outsiders out?
He was running
Like,
around with Vishnu.
what's the Thunderbird been up to? Like in North America, while this shit, it doesn't actually mesh, which is why like I enjoyed where like the fairy tales all came together and that mythology started to connect, and then you start to get in the White God stuff, and it's like how does that work? You'll have no gods before me, except for like these hundreds of thousands of other little gods, like.
No, maybe it'll turn out to be Tolkien, where the gods are essentially the Maiar. Everybody just sort of did the song of unison, and the outsiders were the discontented Melkor, and this, that, and the other thing. And and they each got aspects of reality, because there's word of gems like about how dragons had aspects of reality and humans usurped them, and they were responsible for like go split this continent. I wouldn't be surprised if that was how it was, quote unquote, in the beginning. It's like, I created this, you guys are managing it, and then they fucked up. And I was like, all right, no, you're done managing. You can keep your power, but then you go away. And if you want to stay around managing, you're going to take some limitations.
But I'm sure Jim has given this like some pretty. Like he's been pretty. I feel like his detail has been pretty good, and we know he has a lot of stuff in the behind the scenes that we don't even necessarily ever get to know. Like he's got some pretty extensive like world building that we don't know nothing about. For example, the fact that Odin has Soulfire, which we only got because we randomly got it out of him, because it was probably never going to be in the books. So I'm sure he thought about it, like how big G, smaller G's, and that's just one of those things that I hope we'll get some, like we get in the story or in that compendium after of the world.
Yeah, he's going to have to write his version of the Silmarillion. That's where again.
It does make a little bit of sense. Like if you think of all the little gods as potentially being fallen, or they had their jobs and then fuck them up or something like that. If you just assume like all of those creatures are aspects of Celestia, whatever you want to call it, heaven, and that sort of thing, and they fucked it up on various levels, like I guess that could make some sense. But I
never really think about the triple aspect goddesses like map and stuff as much as gods, but the mothers, kinda, because they're archangel level, but I never thought about them as gods, like a way I think that Odin and Hades are gods.
Right.
Some of it's nomenclature, right? I mean, some of it's just a matter of.
So it's power level, right? At some point,
you that too. But I mean, like a god, they're gods, and Mab is a goddess in all but name, as far as power is concerned, and the way she can influence the earth and the things she can do. I mean, if you had no other word for it, that's pretty much what you would come up with.
Right. I mean, how much above your power level do they need to be before you start throwing the G term around, right? And that's why you got little G's and big G's, and then you've got the G, I guess. Because again, like if you're following Christian mythology, like he's the tops, so he can unzip everybody if he wanted to, but then you've still got Odin and Hades running around, which are classically what everybody would definitely have considered tops, right? So, and then Mab and all of them, they are not on those other power levels, but they've still got quite a bit of power that is beyond any kind of scale most of the mortals are going to have. Like Mab can tank the White Council. Maybe they'll have a shot, all of them, if they knew her true name. That's pretty fucking powerful. I mean, granted, she's got reality shackles and she can't just go on the rampage or whatever, but as far as like raw power goes, yeah, she's up there.
So it's also very interesting then, because from what we've been presented, Merlin he's supposedly a mortal wizard that is, I would say, he has god level powers, like at least mad level, Odin kind of level powers, little G powers.
He probably got a lot of help considering
Right.
his teacher, and he was probably the one who took Mother Winter's walking stick and then passed it down. Now it's at Ebenezer. So, like,
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
that
I wouldn't be
helped him.
shocked if the Merlin was the first black staff either. In addition,
And
He
that
was the
also
first
maybe
warden of
runs in
Demon
the-
Reach. He was the
family line.
the original Merlin. He made the White Council. He set down the laws of magic.
he was probably
and he
the
took
first
walking stick.
gatekeeper on the council proper.
Yeah, he was
Right.
the first
Like
of
he did it
everything.
all, and then he was like, "All right, I need to delegate," because he did what God did.
Or he
They
just
all fucked it up.
disappeared, and then everyone needed to take some of it.
Well, yes, but in the end, they all fucked it up.
The special,
Except for
special,
the recent ones.
the special rules that we know on the council is just, there's the leader of the Merlin, there's the gatekeeper, that's a special role, and there's the black staff, and the rest is just council members from what we know.
From what we know, but not even all of them
Right.
understand the gatekeeper or the black staff. I mean, they probably all understand the black staff, I guess, but maybe not. Because Rashid's false eye has an identity, fake identity.
Well, part of it is the nature of wizards is you don't just hand out information even amongst each other, especially amongst each other.
Well, wizard, I gotta hoard this shit.
Right.
God,
Mine.
they're so annoying.
Because
It's
what
like-
if the other
it's
guy
the
comes at me
trope
one day?
of-
I need to know this.
I could explain everything and we wouldn't have a problem in the story if only we communicated. They'll never communicate.
Well, it's funny because it's built
Wizards
into their
don't.
class.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a feature, not a bug. I mean,
How to know almost everything and yet fuck it up because we don't tell anybody nothing. The Wizards guidebook, like. So.
that's why they can't even be involved in the Oblivion War, because they would fuck it up just by knowing things.
Right.
Well, I mean, we did get to talk about Merlin and Arthurian legend as much as I thought we would, but actually, really, I think we got on some good subjects today.
Yeah, for sure.
No, you could always do it again next time.
Merlin
This
part
is a
2.
topic that branches
Whatever.
into many things.
Shouldn't it be like
Merlin
Merlin Part
adjacent.
5 because he ages backwards? So this was Merlin Part 3. Join us next time for Merlin Part 2. Don't ask too many questions.
Yeah, sometimes their
Well,
numbers
that's-
are a bit confusing anyway.
Don't ask too many questions, part 77.
I mean, we're at episode 120
34.
something, 134. There you go. So don't ask too many questions. Episode the show, just the whole thing. So,
Well, no, 2 of them were devoted to literally asking questions of a certain person. So
And then
yeah, and see
rehashing
where
them.
that got us.
just because
We
it got us more
we got
questions
new
doesn't mean
information.
it worked out okay.
Yeah, we got some important information out of that. Like
The third time's gonna reveal all. I'm sure of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I could tell we had him on the ropes. He was just about to just reveal everything.
He was actually going to give us the manuscripts, but then he was like, eh.
He actually had the dog barking in the background, just like whenever. Okay, they're getting. I just gotta take a break here, collect my thoughts, because they're getting me in the corner right now.
They're getting too close.
Right.
Well, do we want to wrap it up?
Well, next week we're talking about Princess Bride, and Andreas can finally understand that joke in Cold Days.
Oh my God.
There's a chance. There's a chance.
Yeah.
I'm looking
Only
forward
if
to
he
watching
watches
it.
the movie.
Good. I'm glad because it's fantastic. The problem is like I'm not sure what it's going to look like coming at it from this angle, right? Like we all watched it as children, right? When you're supposed to. So like, watching it as an adult and you're going to go in and be like, oh, the graphics are outdated and what the hell's the thing with the giant and the horses and just it's great. And if you thought we had problems last time, like, God.
Last week's episode was a lot of fun. There was a lot of yelling on Justin's part. It was great. But
See, I would like to point out I was not part of that episode.
No, you were
I
not.
didn't do it.
No, but Ichi, you don't yell at anyone. You're just sarcastic and what's the word I'm
Dismissive.
looking for? Well, yeah, that too. That's not the word I was looking for, but yes.
Derisive,
I don't remember. I don't know what the word is.
sardonic.
So many
An
good
asshole.
words.
I take many
That's the
masks
word
and
I
mantles.
You worst many
That's it.
mantles.
Can't top that. Just
Yeah.
pull the trigger.
The rest of the House
Part.
podcast, Broken Just XYZ, Patreon, money,
Yeah.
Discord. You get to talk to us
Discord
on
has
Discord.
been a lot of fun recently, so come join us there.
While the prices are still reasonable because they're going up.
Probably.
Yeah,
Maybe.
inflation, guys.
We can't afford Andreas's mic